Welcome to the Green Podcast. My name is Dylan Welch. I'm the CEO of green.org and Dylan Welch Media. Our goal with this podcast is to bring you the biggest names and leaders in renewable energy, clean technology, and sustainability so that you can stay up to date with the latest trends and everything that is happening in this world. Not only that, you'll get some action items for your life so that you can apply some amazing things and make your world a better place as well. Let's get the show started. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the best podcast in the world, the Green Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Welch, and my goal with this show is to bring the most interesting, amazing, thought-provoking, exciting leaders around the world onto the show to get to know them a little bit better and inspire us to just go out there and do amazing things. So today we have Phnam Bagley. She's an industrial designer, a futurist, aerospace architect, doing just some amazing things. And we're going to get to know Phnam a little bit more today. So Phnam, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Dylan, for having me. I'm so excited about this. There's so many subjects we have to cover here. We're going to make it fun.
Yes. And I want to preface this by saying this is going to be about a 30-minute episode. So we might have to have you back on the show because we might really only scratch the surface. But you're doing some really amazing things in a lot of different areas. So I know this is going to be kind of hard to say and sum up, but just tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Sure. So I was born and raised in France, where I studied industrial design, which is the design of mass manufactured products. And I've always had an inclination and a love for space, for the infinitely big, for the infinitely old, and beautiful. So, I wanted to be an astrophysicist when I was a kid, and because I'm practical and don't really love research, I became a designer. And eventually, throughout my path, academic path, I found a place in space, in the discipline of space architecture. So I moved to the US about 18 years ago to get my master's in that. I know a master's in space architecture sounds very rare. It is. I think we're like 4 people at the time I graduated almost 20 years ago. And it's still a very small field. And space architecture is basically a discipline that focuses on designing spacecraft for humans, basically space habitat on the surface of the moon or Mars, or orbit habitats in microgravity. And back then, I was trained in the way that was really focused on life support system. How are we going to create spacecraft that keeps people alive? And keeping people alive was probably great for about 50 years of the space history. But today we're seeing, non-professional astronauts going up there, and they have needs that are quite different when people are trained in a militaristic way. So people like me, designers, architects, are here to change the way space looks like so it welcomes the whole of humanity.
That's amazing. That's such a... Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that's such a unique, awesome background to have. And like right now, it's such a good time to be doing it too. I mean, obviously with SpaceX kind of like revolutionizing like space travel, and also not only that, but they care about sort of the aesthetics of the spacecraft and the uniforms, and obviously ran by Elon Musk, who cares about, the environment and sustainability, which is also a big part of everything you're doing. So it's like that sweet spot of time to be in that. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please continue.
No, that's wonderful. And I love that you bring up the subject of Elon Musk, because he understands how different industries support each other, right? Going to Mars for the sake of going to Mars is kind of worthless. You really have to solve the energy equations, the rocketry, the transportation and things like that. So that's why he's building all these companies concurrently. And I think that's one thing that we have in common. Obviously I'm a much smaller scale than Elon Musk, and not even close. But it's really understanding that in order to do good design for an extreme environment, you have to understand what's happening from a physical standpoint on the human body, from a psychological standpoint, from a sociological standpoint, the policy, the material use, the sustainability, right? Sustainability in space is not an option. It's the way you have to go, right? Nobody has the luxury to send up as much water, as much fresh food, as much anything up in space because it's so expensive today. Obviously, the price is going to go down over time. I think I can't remember. It was like $80,000 a kilogram to send up to space, 30 years ago, and now it's well under $2,000 a kilogram. So we're going the right way, but we need more innovation to happen up there in order to expand that industry so it serves all of us. Right now, the International Space Station has life support systems that are about 90% efficient, which means that the water, the air is recycled and scrubbed again and again, which doesn't make for a very romantic story of how pleasant it is to be up there, but it also teaches us a lot about effective filtration systems that can, down the line, be brought back to Earth so each of us can live more efficiently.
Exactly. If you have to be sustainable and you have to be efficient, it kind of makes it, possible and shows us here on Earth that maybe we are being a little bit too wasteful. I have so many questions, and obviously I feel like we're gonna have to break this episode into 3 parts because I really want to learn about your background. I want to get to, nonfiction and sort of where you see this industry going as a future. And that might even be like separate episodes, but were you always really good at like space architecture? Were you always really interested? Like, how did sort of the background of you getting this education and going into it start?
So it's kind of hard to say that someone is good at space architecture because it's an ever evolving field. And a lot of what each of us does is usually for the first time, right? What makes our job good is how well we align with the requirements, technical requirements, cost requirements of the customers that we go after. What takes it from a classic space architect to an exceptional one is really taking into account the human-centered design aspect of it. Humans are very unpredictable, even the trained ones, right? We have good days, we have bad days, we have days we don't want to work out, we have days we don't want to work, period. And we have to deal with that, right? And it's going to be harder and harder to deal with it when the distance gets longer, right? Mars is essentially 300 million miles away one way. If someone on Earth tells you to brush your teeth in the morning, you don't feel like it, they can't do anything against it, right? So yeah, it's and that's the part that I love the most, that blurriness of the human aspect of space travel. When we eat, for a long time, we have thought about eating as a way to basically as sustenance. You eat because nutritionally you need that many calories, this kind of nutrition, and part of it can help you protect yourself from dangerous levels of radiation. And all of this is fine. But in the end, we also eat for pleasure. We eat because it's an anchor to a certain culture that we adhere to. We eat because it is collective activity that builds bonds and stories between people. And so as a designer, I think about all of these aspects. And here I'm just giving you the example of food. And by the way, I just give a TED talk on the subject that's called Gourmet Food for the Final Frontier. But I believe that every single aspect of life should be thought of that way. What is the part of design that goes beyond function? Function is great, as a great starting point, but in the end, we need value, and we also need aesthetics. So value can mean, from an economic standpoint, it's profitable, or from the perspective of the Earth, we can actually reduce waste or make systems a little bit more sustainable. And when it comes to aesthetics, a lot of people are terrified of that word because they think it's frivolous, or they think it's just, a cherry on top of the cake. But without aesthetics, we don't have organization of information. We don't have, systems that are easy to use, that you don't need to study for years before being able to execute. So each of us, we're glued to our phones because the design of the value, aesthetics, and function have been curated in a way that works with our brains. And we need to think of all systems, from energy systems, space systems, educational systems, to work that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine, if someone's up in space for months or years at a time and you're confined to a very small space, obviously the technology needs to work, but those small little psychological things can have a huge impact on them performing well. I'm sure after months of eating the same thing or, just like those little cultural experiences of sitting around and chatting, allows that person to get that little break to then go and, perform their job well. So I can 100% see why that's extremely important. So I'm curious, like, so you're the founding partner of Nonfiction. Did you always kind of see yourself as like building your own business and going into this, or how did that sort of come about and get to where you are today?
So I believe that, over my professional adult life, I've always had a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit in me, but I really wanted to start at the right time. And that came after years of working for other design studios and then learning the craft, learning to be good at certain things, learning to have a point of view, which is really the most important thing before you start any business. And then once I felt ready, I asked my husband, who's now my partner, hey, do you want to start this? I think we're ready. I think we have enough maturity, enough experience, and enough um kind of craziness, I guess, to to start this business. And we did it entirely without funding. We basically invested our time and our experience to serve our clients from day one. And the company is about 7 years old now. And one thing that's pretty extraordinary about Nonfiction is that we started as a classic industrial design firm, right? So client would come to us with a technology and they wanted us to design, what the product looks like and how it's being used, which is what we've been doing for years. And then after doing that for a couple of years, we realized, well, we've been doing this for a while. Like we get it. Like, what is next? And then that's when we started thinking very hard about the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we making stuff? Why do people buy our stuff? And what do they do after that, after they use it? So really thinking about the value that it has to people's lives and the value that it might have for this planet. And that's when we made it pretty clear to all of our clients from then that we needed them to align with at least one of the 17 sustainable development goals put together by the United Nations, right? So when we design something, the why has to lie in who is it serving? What kind of infrastructure is it changing? Is it pushing our world towards a better future, or is it just doing the same stuff? Or is it continuing to pollute and spread bad behaviors? And so that ethical kind of like filter that we have to put our clients through and ourselves through is part of the work that we do. And then every year we get more and more sophisticated in the types of projects that we do. We work a lot in neurotechnology, so basically wearables and brain implants that help people feel better, right? Whether they're just suffering from depression, anxiety, PTSD, eating disorder, epilepsy, or even like spinal cord injuries. We have developed products that actually help these people. Human-centered design is quite interesting because it forces us to listen rather than come up with like the wild sci-fi ideas and just like wishing for the best. We have a kind of like a business responsibility towards our clients. We want them to be successful. We want them to sell products, and we want to make sure that the impact that was at the source of why the company exists has been fulfilled by the products that we designed for them.
That's like one of the most amazing answers I've ever had on this podcast. And I just want to like say how much you sort of summed up like years and years and textbooks and just stories of like the entrepreneurial journey, because you basically went from having a career, learning a lot, making that leap into entrepreneurship, kind of taking that jump, taking that risk. Then, you obviously, when you're starting that business, you have to get revenue, you have to get clients. But then you got to a point where you felt comfortable and you were looking sort of to the future, what trends are going to happen, what industries are going to emerge, and you're able to kind of shift towards that. Then you got to a point where you're like, okay, cool, we're comfortable and we want to only take on clients and projects that we care about, which is of sustainability. And then you got to a point where you're able to give back. Like, I don't know if like you probably see your career day to day and as an entrepreneur, you're just putting out fires and doing all these things, but like, I know it's a very simplified version, but that's something like very inspiring that I hope a lot of people can take from this. And I think a lot of people, everyone who's listening to this or watching this, can find themselves somewhere on that timeline and say, okay, this is where I want to go next. And you just inspired me to do that as well. So that's really cool to hear that journey, and they're able to do that and like think so far ahead into the future, obviously. Really quick, like, can you kind of walk us through just some interesting, cool projects or clients that you've worked on in the past that you really enjoyed putting together?
Sure. So I mentioned earlier neurotechnology. So we designed quite a few wearables that help with different aspects of life. So one that just came out in December is a wearable that you wear just before going to bed. So a lot of us experience either insomnia or different forms of bad sleep. And bad quality sleep has been linked to long-term, health problems like dementia and Alzheimer and things like that, on top of being very unpleasant in your regular adult life. So we've been working with neuroscientists and research scientists from UC Berkeley to develop this product that essentially what it does is that it uses a gentle electrical stimulation of the prefrontal cortex to teach your brain how to fall asleep. So essentially, there's a very specific brainwave pattern that happens about 15 minutes before you fall asleep. That's when your eyes start getting heavy, you start feeling drowsy and ready for sleep. When you follow that specific pattern, the magical thing that happens is that your brain knows what to do the rest of the night. It goes through the 4 cycles of sleep, which are called N1, N2, N3, and deep sleep. It goes through that 4 or 5 times a night. And that's when we're able to get results like uninterrupted sleep throughout the night and high quality sleep, which means about an hour and a half of REM sleep and deep sleep. And so obviously having people fall asleep quickly, efficiently every night, we can see the effects of it on our own health, but it also affects our relationships, right? When we don't sleep well, we get pissed off a lot faster, easier, and we might not be very pleasant at work. And so there are many different, repercussion of putting products out there, but most importantly, making them attainable, right? This product could cost thousands of dollars. People are ready to invest a lot of money and effort into getting a good night's sleep. But the type of work that we do makes it attainable in the sense that, you can get it for $300. You can try it out. And, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it does, it can be life-changing. So that's one of the products that we came up with like recently. That's pretty interesting. But we do a lot of, working like brain implants as well in psychedelics. So we've developed this VR environment for people who are going through depression, anxiety, and eating disorder. And, after testing on some patients in a doctor's office, we actually realized that VR helps reduce the amount of ketamine, in this particular case, used by half. All you have to do is use half the ketamine, which means that it's easier to recover. It's easier for people to come back for more sessions. And essentially, clinical depression states can be essentially reversed in 6 sessions. And that's completely revolutionary, right? If you compare that to therapy, if you compare that to medication, which may or may not work for certain patients, usually we go after patients that have tried these other therapies where it didn't work for them, it was not sustainable in their lifestyle, and giving them a solution that actually meets their requirements. And so in space, we're also involved in dealing with different aspects of space. We're creating this microgravity kitchen that's designed for long-term space missions, like going to Mars. And basically, it's not only giving that sustenance I was talking about earlier to astronauts, but also the agency and the freedom to make the food they want however they want it, right? Giving them texture and color and culture and really that freedom that would give a little bit of comfort to the harsh life they'll have to sustain for a number of years. So yeah, this is the kind of like realm of work that we do. I can go on forever, but in the end, what we do, the kind of like the thesis of our company in 2023 is how do we develop technology on Earth that's sustainable and makes people's life better and treats our planets with more respect? And how do we take all of this and bring it up to space? And how do we develop things in extreme environments like space that use very small amounts of resources and isolation and stress and things like that, and bring it back to Earth so it benefits each and every one?
Sounds like you're doing some amazing work, have some amazing clients. I wouldn't be surprised if some people listening to this or watching reach out to see if you're hiring. And I mean, for me personally, I've been traveling for the past 2 months or so, and I am getting horrible sleep just because I've been in hotels. And so like hearing about what you're mentioning in terms of, poor sleep leads to poor work and poor communication, like I'll invest right now. Tell me where to sign up. But I want to be respectful of your time. Like I said, we're going to have to come bring you back on the show and, turn this into a 3-4 part series because we're just scratching the surface. But where do you sort of see, yourself and nonfiction going in the next 5-10 years? I know that's a pretty broad question because a lot of things can change by then, but just where do you sort of see things looking forward to?
Yeah, as a business, we're always looking to grow in a in a way that makes sense with our vision, right? Um, my partner and I control the vision of this company, and public speaking, which I do a lot of, helps a lot because it forces us to refine the story that we tell to make sure that it's understandable by our audience. And it also creates this air of transparency, right? I'm not the kind of designer who just like hides the methodologies that we use. I really want everyone to have access to them. So that's pretty incredible. When it comes to the technologies and the impact on the environment that we want to have, I want to start exploring synthetic biology. So basically, it's like genetic engineering or manufacturing of biological materials, and really thinking about how we can create a future that is regenerative. Because so far, even though we're creating all of these amazing technology, we're still using, the same plastics, the same metals, the same PCB materials, and some of them can be recycled, but how many times? And most of them end up in the landfill. So that urgency in the responsibility that we have as designers is really coming in front of me in an alarming way. And I want to find solutions that are viable. Viable meaning that our clients should be able to afford to make decisions that way that are better for everyone and better for the environment. So yeah, there's a conference coming up called Biosyn Beta, and basically they will focus on that because there's a lot of materials that can only be fabricated in microgravity. There's been some experiments aboard the ISS, like crystals and different types of bioengineering, and we're super interested in that. I mean, I want a future where the computer that I'm using to speak with you right now is grown, right? What that means is that it uses a different way of computing information and creating communication tools between us. But once I'm done using this computer after the 4 or 5 years I usually use them for, I can throw it out in my garden perhaps, and then nature can take it over and it can become food for that environment. I really look forward to a future. We're nowhere near to it. It might happen after I'm dead, but I really want to start putting a foot in that direction because that is the direction that makes sense for this planet.
That is really interesting to think about. Man, you just opened up more questions than anything. So like I said, we're going to turn this into a 3-4 part series. I want to be respectful of your time, but for now, thank you so much for being here first and foremost. If you're listening, we didn't even get to talk about this, but where you are in your office is, as you mentioned, like a library of different materials you use, which is really cool. So, one last thing, how can we support you? How can we sort of, help you? What can we do as an audience, as people who are passionate about entrepreneurship, sustainability, futurism? What can we do to support your goals and your vision?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're always looking for crazy people with crazy ideas who want to take that idea and then make it real, right? That's really the premise of our business. We take people's ideas and we make it real, we make it attainable, we make it a business. So, everything from biotech, neurotech, wearables, education system, transportation, robotics, aerospace, whatever. Like if you know of anybody who needs the filter of design to come up with wonderful solutions, we're here. And then, if you want to follow us, I do a lot of like public speaking, as I said earlier. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. We have our Instagram for nonfiction.design. It's pretty active as well. We also have an educational video series that we call Future. You can find it on futurefuture.design or on YouTube. And essentially, it's really breaking down how we think and how we practice design. As I said earlier, transparency is very important to me. I used to be a professor. There's no hiding what we do or how we do it, because it's only when we work together that we can come up with new ideas and new ways of thinking about solutions. So transparency is so incredibly important to me. So we produce that, and it's accessible to everyone. And accessibility is very important to me because it's, I can be very nerdy about talking about space or biology or neurotech or whatever, but it's not going to open the door for more conversation. So we always make sure that we prepare all of our assets in layman's terms, right? Someone's child, someone's grandmother, someone's who lives in a different country should be able to understand everything we say so they can find a common ground and want to work with us.
And that's why I want to thank you for being on this show, because that's basically what our goal is to talk to cool, awesome, interesting, smart people and just share that with the world and, inspire a little bit wherever we can. So Phnam, I want to thank you so much for being here. And again, I'm looking forward to chatting a little bit more, on future podcast episodes.
Well, it's such a pleasure speaking with you, Dylan, and I look forward to the next one.
Awesome. Thank you. And to everyone who tuned in, who watched the episode, listened, supports green.org. We're going to link everything that Phnam just said in the episode description. Please go and support any way you can. Like I said, we're going to have Phnam on a few more episodes in the future because this is super fascinating stuff. And until then, we appreciate your support. We appreciate everything you're doing. Hopefully you got something cool out of this episode, can apply it to your life, or just start thinking a little bit. So again, our goal with this show is to bring on inspiring leaders in business, tech, finance, energy, space, everything, to learn a little bit more about what they're doing and apply it to our lives so we can all find a little bit more success, live a little bit more sustainably, be a little bit more happy, and make the world a better place. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you so much for tuning into the episode. My name is Dylan Welch. Appreciate it. As always, stay up to date with the latest information on green.org and dylanwelch.com. Dylan Welch Media is a full-service media and communications agency dedicated to promoting, marketing, and helping businesses in clean tech, renewable energy, and sustainability grow, get more clients, get more customers, get in front of their ideal clientele. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. If you're interested in joining the Green Summit, go to www.green-summit.org. Reserve your ticket today. There's very few spots left, so make sure you get on that ASAP. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.